What's up, guys? Here comes another lesson on factoring. I mentioned yesterday that we were going to go ahead and step it up in terms of the level of difficulty with the factoring, and that you couldn't really rely on shortcuts. I'm just going to give you guys a bit of like a play-by-play on how I would approach these. So let's start off with number one, right? So I'll put the little note guide right over here, right? Factoring, right? What I want you to do is always first look for any GCF, right? Any greatest common factor, and then you're going to factor like normal, right? So in this case, if you look at the x squared for number 1, x squared minus x and negative 2, there's no GCF, right? There's not a number that you can divide all three terms by, and you can't pull out an x because that third term doesn't have an x. So GCF doesn't work, and so the next resort is that I want you to go ahead and you're going to factor using the X puzzle and then factor by grouping. Okay, so let's do number 1. So GCF didn't work, so we got to go ahead and factor by grouping. So doing the X puzzle for this one, my A is 1, my B is -1, and my C is going to be -2. Top number is A times C, so that's going to be -2. And my B is going to be -1. So we're going to figure out, okay, what times what will go ahead and get me -2, but adds up to -1. So that's pretty simple. You got -2 times +1. So -2 times +1 gets me -2, but I add up -2 plus 1, that gets me -1. So that works. So I'm going to go ahead and set up, write my first term, x squared. Then I have minus 2x plus 1, because that's plus 1x from the left and right term, minus 2. And then I'm going to go ahead and factor it. So using my little fence, separate the first and second term. And then the GCF of the first term is x. So that's going to be x, and I pull out next to be x minus 2. And then the GCF for the second one, since it leaves with a positive, and it can't be divisible by 1, you can't pull out a variable, that would be 1. That would be x minus 2. Now, it looks good because the two parentheses are exactly the same, so I know I'm doing something right. So my final answer for this one is going to be x minus 2, x plus 1. Alright? So that's basically what we did last week. Now we need to combine everything and then try to fully factor out. It could be a 1, 2, or sometimes maybe 3-step process. Alright? Alright, so let's look at number 4, which I circled in red. First thing we got to do is we got to see if there's a GCF. Well, between 5, 55, and 150, the GCF of this one, they're all divisible by 5. And that's it. You can't pull out an x or anything like that due to the fact that that third term doesn't have an x. So when I pull out a 5, that's going to net me x squared plus 11x plus 30. Alright? Now, this is the part where people stop. But remember, multiple steps. GCF, and then you got to see if you can factor using the x puzzle. So let's factor using the x puzzle. So now my A for this case is 1, and we're only looking inside of the parentheses. That 5 is kind of irrelevant for now. My A is 1, my B is 11, and my C is going to be 30. So A times C is going to be 30, and my B is going to be 11. And we need to figure out what times what gets me 30, but adds up to 11. So that's going to be 6 and 5. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. So I want to just focus on the parentheses, but you gotta make sure in the end you know that the 5 is going to be lingering somewhere. So I'm going to do x squared. I'm going to split up my terms. Now that 11 doesn't exist anymore. It actually becomes my 6x and then my 5x, so that'll be plus 6x plus 5x, and then that's going to be plus 30. Again, that GCF of 5 will come back to play at the very end. So now we need to do our little fence of the first and second with the third and fourth. My GCF of the first and second term is going to be x, leaving me x plus 6. My GCF of the third and fourth term is 5, so that'll be plus 5, and be x plus 6. And look at that. Both of them are x plus 6, so we're good to go. So since they both have x plus 6 in common, I'll write that down. And then the x and that plus 5 is on the outside, be x plus 5. And my GCF is going to go ahead in the very end, stick in the very front. So my final answer is this: 5, parentheses, x plus 6, parentheses, x plus 5. Now, sometimes on the answer key, they might have it out of order with the parentheses. That's okay. So if you get 5, then x plus 5, x plus 6. Totally fine. Okay, it's gonna work. All right. Let's try one last one. I want you to pause the video real quick. Right? I'll pause it with you, and let's go ahead and try number 7. All right. So pause it real quick. All right. So first thing you should have done was find the GCF. So the GCF is 6. They're all divisible by 6. Always check to see what the largest number is. If you got how the GCF, go back a couple weeks and review how to find the GCF. So if I pull out a 6, that'll be 6n squared minus 9n plus 14. And then I need to focus on the parentheses. Remember that GCF is going to come and play in a bit. So we need to go ahead and find our A, 1, B is negative 9, and my C is going to be 14. Setting up my x puzzle, A times C is 14, and then my B is negative 9, and the two numbers that multiply to get me positive 14 and add up to negative 9 would be negative 2 and negative 7. So that leaves my GCF, bringing it down. You can drag the GCF down if you want, if you forget, but that becomes n squared minus 2n minus 7n plus 14, right? And then I'm going to focus on the first and second with the third and fourth. Because the first and second, the GCF is n, that's going to leave me n over n minus 2. The third term leaves with a negative 7, so that'll be minus 7, and that'll be n minus 2 as well. Don't forget the GCF. It's going to come and play in a bit later. And then, so these two are good. So that means I'll be n minus 2, and then these two will be my second set of parentheses. And then remember I said my GCF, it's going to stick in the very front. All right, make sure you guys nail these down, all right? You got the GCF, and then make sure you go ahead and factor trinomials. All right, take care, guys. Remember, if you need me on Wednesday, message me and I can set up a Google Meet. All right, stay safe.